Everyone, I think we are live now and all our panels are getting ready because our panel is coming from across the world. So welcome to the webinar on Is PropTech a Career Option for You, hosted by ReWomen and LMRE. In this webinar, we hope to give you a taster of the various routes to get into this space, and we'll demonstrate by our global panel as they talk through their career journeys. We'll delve into the skills that are needed, also very transferable, roles that are available, and why to look into this emerging sector. For those who don't know me, my name is Teresa Dickens, co-founder of LMRE, the global PropTech recruitment firm. I'm also board director of the United Kingdom PropTech Association and host the PropCast, which is a property technology podcast. So if you want to learn more about the space, just tune into it. It's an app on Spotify. Two of our panel today, Helen and Zander, also feature on it. And I would love to hand you quickly over to Anouk as well, who's co-hosting today with ReWomen.
Thank you very much, Louisa. I'm so energized to be here with all these wonderful panelists. A little bit about myself and Real Estate Women. My name is Anouk Khan. Real Estate Women was set up in 2012 to tackle the gender diversity and inclusion challenge. It's still a challenge 9 years on, so we are continuing to do our work. And this partnership with LMRE is really important because we're offering our members a new opportunity. Firstly, it's a bridge between property and PropTech, which is so siloed. And secondly, during this pandemic, where the nature of work is changing, furlough, job security, we're hoping that this partnership brings a lot of interesting and exciting opportunities for women who want to pivot or are actively looking. And I've seen the jobs that LMRE coming through. It's across the globe. They're super exciting. So I myself are very keen to listen to what it means to be a salesperson or a developer or so forth in PropTech. So thanks very much for this partnership.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Anouk. But I guess enough about LMRE and ReWomen. Let me quickly introduce you to the panel. And sorry if I go on for about 30 seconds too long, but I'll go a brief summary and then they'll delve into it a little bit more later. So first of all, we have Helen joining us all the way from, I think it's Singapore, and she's head of innovation and development practice at Lendlease Asia. Helen's currently juggling several roles as a global leader in her industry, Kellogg MBA student, and a mother of 3 kids, which are under 5 years old. So she's actually quickly rushed from work to come join us. So she might be joining us a little bit later. But background to Helen is she has over 19 years experience in property development and management across urban regeneration projects in Australia and Asia. And prior to that, she actually started off her career in law and also medicine. And now she's leading business and digital transformation projects in PropTech and innovation. We'll also hear about how Helen works within PropTech for women, as she's a global role model for visionary leadership, advocating women in real estate technology. So welcome, Helen. And now for Hannah Prideaux's introduction. Hannah is the investment manager and head of operations for Patrizia. Hannah started off her career as a chartered surveyor at the well-known Savills, which very traditional real estate agent, where she specialised in commercial valuations before joining the top 4 consultancy PwC. But then in 2017, she pivoted her career completely and moved into PropTech and joined a B2B2C residential platform, working in operations and product. And before she joined a tenant engagement platform called District Tech. And she is now moved into VC, which we'll hear more about later. So thank you for that, Hannah. And now we go on to my good friend Zander's introduction. Now, Zander is joining us all the way from Palm Beach. His background might allude that he's in Brooklyn, but he is hibernating Palm Beach during this COVID time. So special shout out to that, because I think it's something like 6 or 5 a.m. for him. Zander is head of strategic partnerships and business development for Metaprop, which is one of the leading global real estate innovation VCs. They have something like 100 PropTech investments globally. Before that, Zander was acting as a senior solutions engineer for BTS, which is the #1 technology platform for leasing asset management globally. For those who don't know what senior solutions engineer is, Zander can tell you what it is earlier, because I didn't know what it was 2 years ago. And he came completely out of real estate and technology before, which he'll tell you a little bit more about later. And last but definitely not least, we've got Teresa Lee. Teresa is the VP of Strategic Engagement at Roundhill Ventures VC. And in Teresa's role, she focused on driving innovation in LPs and connecting them with portfolio companies. Now, prior to that, Teresa led London operations at a unicorn hospitality PropTech. She's also previously experienced as a strategy consultant at the famous Boston Consulting Group. Teresa also has an MBA from Columbia Business School, which specializes in strategy and real estate, and a BS in hotel administration from Cornell University with a minor in real estate. So pretty impressive credentials over there. But I guess it's time to start with the questions. So big thank you for all who's joining us from across the world. I hope that everyone listening in already can identify the different career paths our panel have taken to get into PropTech, and I'm looking forward to them all elaborating on this earlier in a bit. So let's start with the questions. Why don't we just start a nice little warm up for everyone? How did you find yourself working in this sector? Hannah, do you want to start off? I feel like maybe some of these people are from the traditional real estate community, and you started off your career in obviously Savills, and tell us what attracted you to this space, and maybe something which you're slightly hesitant about.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Louisa. And yeah, great to be here. So nice to meet everyone. So yeah, a fairly traditional real estate background, like you said. So a chartered surveyor by background. I started at Savills. I moved to PwC. So I did essentially 10 years of real estate, corporate finance, debt portfolio sales and acquisitions and valuations across those two companies. So they're fairly sort of corporate experience, I'd say. Really interesting experience. But within that time, I saw quite a lot of inefficiencies within real estate. So this was in 2017. I really just wanted to make a bit of a change, to be honest. So back in 2017, PropTech wasn't that well known, and obviously Louisa, jump in as well, you all know this as well. It wasn't that well known back in 2017, so it was a case of, I knew I wanted to make a bit of a difference, make a change. I then found a tech solution actually that I wanted to join, and then made the leap from PwC to a resi tech platform. A couple of things that really interested me about it initially was just the variety of experience you get in tech companies. It's just a very different experience to what you'd get in a corporate. Not good or bad, it's just very different. And that was certainly a big draw for me. And also just trying something new, to be honest. I certainly thought at that stage, if I didn't do it now, I wasn't going to do it at all. That was just how I felt at the time. And I guess hesitant. I was probably a bit hesitant, if I'm honest, about losing the brand and credibility, because everyone knows PwC, everyone knows all the companies you've introduced this morning, everyone knows all of them. So moving, and certainly in 2017, it was a very different market to what it is today in 2021. Whereas if you go to a PropTech now from big corporate, actually it's almost seen as it's a sort of a natural next step, if you want to make that next step. Whereas back then, I know we're only talking about a few years, but it wasn't a natural step at all. So I think quite a few of my colleagues thought I was nuts, to be honest, when I left. A secure background, a decent salary, to go to something which had no brands, completely unknown in the industry. So I was pretty hesitant about that, but it was definitely the right decision.
It's gone well so far, Hannah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are slightly concerned about moving away from that comfort blanket or big consultancies, agencies. Zander, talk us through what attracted you to PropTech. You've been, obviously you're in a VC now, you've been in a startup, you joined, it's doing very well now, but it was early stage. And didn't you study something like marketing at university? How did you get into this space? Because some people listening in today are from a completely different route.
Yeah, so it was more of it was an interesting route. It took a lot of different turns at first, and still probably will. And I think that's kind of an important lesson as you go through it and navigate your career, is like, as a lot of us, despite us having possibly a linear vision, it's often just like clamoring through the dark, where you're just picking out and identifying people that you can listen to, speak with, and they'll help guide you. But a lot of it does have to do with you trying to pick out and take on those risks, as Hannah's saying. You don't want to take too much of a risk, but you will inevitably do so. And that kind of goes back to the story of, I studied real estate and marketing at university, so I knew that I had passion for on the business development side, and just how engaging with customers and potentially with real estate, what would that really turn into? Didn't necessarily want to join on the traditional side, but found myself in a research analyst role, which led me to this conclusion that there was a lot of gaps in the data that we were using, and it was at a hedge fund. So realizing that this was the information we were sourcing from for our assumptions. However, I noticed that where the data was coming from, there was a significant issue. So with that disconnect, I said, why don't I pursue? And I remember this moment having in a parking lot of a supermarket saying, what if there was real estate and technology? This is circa 2015, 14, around there. It's like, what if real estate and tech existed together? What would that look like? Is that a career? Really wasn't many opportunities at the time. And actually the first place I joined, switching from finance into real estate and into technology, was a data room where I wanted to focus and build out an arm for transactions, real estate transactions. And it was a data room that had existed for a while. It wasn't necessarily a startup, but it sort of was selling itself and positioning it as that. And that really led me to navigate a company that wasn't really necessarily moving forward. So I had to take another step back, say, well, this is clearly not where I want to be on the technology side. Where is the real startup? Where is that, like the fostering of something that's transforming the industry? Where is that happening? And actually through, again, laying out the landscape of all of the players, trying to find someone that could, point me in the right direction. Identified a former VP from Savills through my sister's friend, interesting enough, who was at Columbia University, and her father worked in real estate at Joico, which is a plumbing company, one of the largest plumbing producers. And that led me to be introduced to VTS. Early days, and again, much like a lot of, very glam. Just enough, dude, love on the plumbing and production side. A lot of it happening over there. But this is where you get to, okay, this is kind of all made up. We're just saying we're going to transform the industry. What does that necessarily mean? But it's a lot of learning on the job and taking that leap, really the leap of faith that this is the kind of team that I'm really excited about. And that's what really gave me the confidence to switch over. But there was certainly a lot of hesitation and many failures along the way.
Yeah. Well, failures are what makes us, right? Teresa, I'd love to bring you in on this. We just spoke about, Columbia. We spoke about, your experience at Columbia, Cornell. Obviously, you've worked for the famous BCG. You also worked for a super risky hospitality startup. What was your journey like, and why did you make the move? Because not many, people dream of, obviously go to the MBA, working at Boston Consulting Group. Why was the move for you, and what were you hesitant about?
Yeah, definitely. I think a little bit different compared to Zander and Hannah was I didn't feel like I ever took a big risk in my career, and I think that was a little bit calculated on my end. I think for a lot of people, and like young people, especially if you're just coming out of university, when they look at their career, they hope like they see somebody and they want to like emulate it. They're like, oh, they did 2 years as an analyst and they jumped to this promotion. And I think I tried to do a little bit of that calculation, but I think like anybody, you realize very quickly in life, like life never quite goes that way. But I think what I did think about with every single step I took or every single move I took was, does my story make sense? So I always looked at what I did in my background, and then if I could kind of make the arch of the story in my career to my next job. Because I think when you look at moving and pivoting in your career, you should never be looking at the direct next step. You should be thinking if this next step makes sense for the step after that. So if you're always looking 2 steps in advance, the next step you make will always be a stepping stone, and it will never ever be that risky. So I think even going from real estate analyst to the MBA always opens doors, right? So that wasn't a risk there. Going from the MBA to BCG doesn't close any doors there. Always good to have BCG and another kind of brand on your CV. And I think the bigger risk I took was probably leaving BCG to go to Zander. At that point, I think you kind of need to say like, you only get to leave consulting once. You can only spin that, pivot once. So if I'm choosing at that point to go back into hospitality and real estate, it's kind of like I'm choosing that as my career. So I think if I took any risky step, it would have been that move. But I think again, like anything, it's just a matter of how you sell it to the next employer. Because I kind of sold it to myself as it's a great experience. I'm getting scale up experience in a unicorn. I joined right before their Series D, so it was really scale up mode, especially in London. So I think even if I wanted to move out of hospitality or real estate after that, I had great operational scale up experience from Zander. So I think it's making smart moves and taking calculated risk is the best way I would describe it.
Yeah.
And then of course go into Zander, open the door to move into the VC side. So I think each step takes you, you know, one step closer to something else.
Thank you for that, Teresa. Now, everyone who's listening, there's so many different verticals in PropTech, or I kind of want to steer away from PropTech. Let's call it built environment innovation, because obviously, like Teresa said, she worked in hospitality. Then there's also commercial tech. Then there's resi tech, and there's sustainability, energy, clean tech, anything you put tech at the end. But there's also contact, which is a massive emerging sector. And Helen, if you are there, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your career and how you moved from law, medicine into traditional real estate, lend lease. I think everyone listening in today knows who lend lease are, and how you've pivoted into the innovation side of it as well, whilst also growing a big family.
Yeah. Hi, Louisa. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Or see me? Great. And thank you for the opportunity and listening to my panelists here. It's just really inspiring. I think a lot of people look at my career and they go, oh, that's really sporadic. But really, the reality is I've always really just, you know, probably the oldest on the panel here, but I've always in the last 20 years really just chased my passion, and the passion is in real estate. I always think about, you know, the pharaohs in the Egypts in the centuries where they used to build pyramids, and I feel like buildings and the built environment and the precincts and urbanization, which is a core passion of what I do today, is the, you know, the pyramids of the modern future, and the cities that we're building that influences the contribution of how we live and work and breathe and play. So when it comes to career, I've always been focused around, when I was in law, I was really focused around construction law and looking at, you know, the innovations around how we get more productive and efficient and, you know, improve safety in the way we work. Then I moved into asset management, and, you know, if you look at asset management, you know, about 15, 20 years ago, there's no concept of PropTech, but there were like really manual ways of doing things. Yardi and SAP started coming up with, you know, CRM platforms and whatnot. And as I did, you know, a lot of those asset management, leasing, center management roles, you kind of go, oh, should be a better way of running a rent roll, or looking at our, you know, asset sort of efficiencies. The BMS should talk to each other. The leasing, you know, shouldn't be done by Excel spreadsheets and models, and then Diana modeling came out, and CTI came out, and Yardi came out, and Oracle came out with all these platforms, and none of them talk to each other. So we started, you know, as I moved into through my career, every role was about thinking about some of the innovations that could happen. So we started, you know, working with companies like Yardi and Argus, and to create bespoke solutions on how do we integrate a lease agreement, or how do you integrate the agreement to a rent roll? How do we actually look at the rent roll to the performance of the tenants and the retailers and the occupants? And then how do we actually look at it from a reporting perspective? So I guess, you know, like for me, all this really organically grew within the passion for real estate and just the passion to kind of work with the teams and the environment. And then PropTech popped up, you know, in very recent years, this concept of innovating and a technology ecosystem. But really in real estate, it's just, you know, looking at things to make us work smarter and better. And now I'm really proud that the ecosystem has really evolved and matured, and that there's so many opportunities, and the opportunities is to work with the VCs and the startups in the community, because we can't solve everything on our own. And therefore, you know, there's a great opportunity now with the way cities are shaping, and we're looking at sustainability and climate change, and how we actually improve the experience to an individual, and that's through real estate and technology. And therefore, you know, PropTech is just makes sense to me. So it's a really inspirational and passion that, you know, I've been working on in the last 2 decades.
Awesome, thank you for that, Helen. Now, Helen just sort of just mentioned about all the opportunities that are coming up. A lot of people listening here are wondering, what are these opportunities? You know, what are the transferable skills? So you each do different roles, and I'd love to hear about your movements. So Hannah, maybe we'll start off with you. So what transferable skills did you have when you went from, I guess, Savills and PwC's consultancy into a business development director role? and then also into VC, because people are like, well, you know, obviously those are two roles you can go into, those listening, but what skills did you transfer across? Because lots of people don't want to do their APC study and that will go to these, get into these maze consultancies and leave that all behind.
Yeah, no, cheers, Louisa. I think it's a really, really interesting question. And to be honest, it was the questions I was asking myself as well before I actually made the move. And I think I completely agree with Teresa's point earlier. I think you really need to obviously look ahead in your career and say, actually, if I want to get to X, how do I get there? And as you said, you know, it's not necessarily you get there directly, but you get there as stepping stones. So, so you know, you're constantly learning as you go as well. So I would definitely not say I knew everything before I joined startups. I mean, quite the opposite. I had, you know, quite a traditional background. So in terms of what did I take over, I suggest, to be honest, a bit of everything. I think one of the things I didn't quite appreciate until I moved out of the big corporates was actually how much you learn in those big corporates and the big institutions, that you just, because everyone else, you know, everyone else is essentially the same around you. You're all, you know, fairly high caliber. You're all learning off each other. So I don't think until you stepped out of that environment, you appreciate everything that you've done within that space, whether it's, you know, we're talking about hard skills and soft skills. Soft skills in particular, actually, which I don't think you quite appreciate until you've kind of stepped away. So certainly all of that, and they were all the obvious things, you know, how to communicate, how to start thinking about a business plan, how to put documents together, how to start looking at strategy, etc. The things which so that's everything I guess I took with me, but then obviously you're learning a huge amount in these new spaces. So obviously, I mean, I joined quite early stage companies, so it was a case of actually throw yourself in the deep end and just learn as quickly as you can, because there's no one to really learn off. And it's, again, you will make mistakes, and that's, you know, that's fine to some degree, of course. You know, everyone does make mistakes, and that's of course how you learn as well. So I was learning in particular a lot of operational things. I hadn't really had operational roles, for example. And then in my next role, I set up a whole business development team, which I'd never done before, but I could do it because of all the other sort of, I guess, transferable skills I'd had in the, you know, the initial startup, and then also the 10 years of the sort of institutional experience that I had. So I'd say took over a huge amount, but, you know, similarly learned a huge amount and still learning a huge amount, because as you said before, so I moved from startup to venture capital just a year and a bit ago. So again, that was an interesting transition. But again, one of the big things I'm taking to this role is the fundraising piece, because I did part of that when I was at PwC. So it's constantly learning, but it's very exciting at the same time.
Constantly challenging yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Zander, back to you. So when you first moved into PropTech, you did a role called a solutions engineer. Now we call them integration managers over here across the world. Everyone has different. Can you talk through the audience what transferable skills you took? Well, you learned there, and how you've applied them in a more of a business development strategy role within VC.
Yeah. So for the solutions engineer, which is it is, and sometimes I refer to sales engineer. There's integrations specialists. There's a lot of different terms for it, and each org and startup has a different definition, but more or less it's, you know, that technical business development person who sits between product engineering and sales. So you're there to, one, translate that product and also deliver on, or, you know, open up and identify the end goals for the client so that they're successful. So, you know, you think about the entire client life journey. And I think that the skill that I had, at least the just, you know, the general awareness, was just an obsession with, you know, understanding and studying and researching. I just loved that. I loved learning about the clients, and was just generally fascinated by the histories behind these organizations, by everyone's careers, and then by the technical side of it. So really, without an engineering background, but just diving deep and asking a lot of questions, possibly too many questions, and just sitting hot desking with folks who were on the development side and on the implementation team, and spending that time learning about their how the products work, how they were building, what they were designing, all of that process. It was a lot of learn on the job, and much like, you know, coming up with a lot of our strategies and tactics at VTS as we engaged with the broader industry, you know, building, and we were just setting our own playbook. So it was very much carte blanche and the opportunity So I myself saw that, really took the blinders off, which I think is really critical in a startup. Is, you know, you're going to join and do and work on your specific role, but to take that opportunity to learn and sit with other pieces of the organization was extremely critical. You know, for me to understand the workings of a startup and then to bring that same perspective, pretty a wide perspective, as I work with the marketing team, data team, finance team, sales, and then all the way up to strategy. Take that same you know, wide lens and then bring that over to our portfolio companies is something that I think is a very important for, you know, the empathy that drives that communication. So the startup can connect with you because you've been in the same situations. You can calm them down when things look like they're not going to go in the direction they had planned for, and say, you know, we've been through this cycle before, and also really enjoying being in the you know, in the trenches with them as they're approaching, say, like a product launch. Just what does that look like? Where is this, you know, as we go into the unknown, it's what's going to happen. You know, taking them, you know, really off that ledge is always a common conversation. And that's just, you know, it comes with experience, and you have to go through many of these cycles to get that. But to be willing and, you know, able and actually really just like curious, that was, I think, if I really boil it all down, just generally curious about learning about new industries, new sides, and new skills. So that's it's more or less what I think the makings of a good solutions engineer, and then taking that to the business development side is really the same skill set.
Yeah. Teresa, I can see you nodding to a lot of what Zander says, and coming from someone who's obviously been in the startup, probably had worked for like people like Zander. What transferable skills did you sort of take to, obviously, first of all, Sonder, and then with you onto Roundhill Ventures?
Yeah, absolutely. So agree a lot with what Hannah said and Zander said in terms of like the soft skills and hard skills you learn in kind of professional services. And then exactly as Zander said, you just gain credibility when you're talking to people. If you're in a VC and you can say, hey, I've worked at a startup, so I know how difficult it is. And you have that empathy and know like, hey, we want to make reporting for our portcos as easy as possible, because we know when you're in a startup, you're so short for resources. And, you know, the last thing you want to do is be sending metrics to your investors. So I think exactly as Zander says, like, whatever you can put, you can change the hat of like, I can put on the startup hat and understand where they're coming from. And I think absolutely took a lot of what I learned throughout all of my career into each of the next roles. And I think, again, as Hannah said, you're just able to kind of pivot what you did and apply it to a different role. Because at the end of the day, I think a lot of it is smart people figuring out how to get stuff done. And a lot of that is just drawing on past experiences.
Thank you for that. Helen, love to bring you back into this conversation, and we can look at it from more of a innovation angle, but also, you know, going from Lendlease, which is a developer that's been around for bloody ages. And I'm sure it's fairly traditional in the way it used to operate, but it's really been pushing forward in the innovation space and trying to do things differently. What in terms of what transferable skills have you seen in construction, which takes forever to do, obviously, and maybe a bit, is Lendlease trying to do a little bit more sort of upskilling as well in some of your teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think the great opportunity about Lendlease being not only a large organization, but our business model is an end-to-end business model whereby we can influence investment, construction, you know, like development, and then also we operate a lot of our assets around the world. So that integrated, you know, model enables us to pretty much create value through investments, technology, and innovation. So, you know, the built environment is a great testing ground for anything when it comes to technology, innovation, creative processes. And I think through the growth in my career, you know, pushing myself to, I mean, sometimes it is confronting to be in a construction site, particularly in Asia. The last site we were on had more than 10,000, you know, male workers, and you're the handful of 5. It's quite daunting, but I think, you know, being with a company like Lendlease, there's a lot of great opportunities, and we really foster that, you know, mentorship, the opportunities to kind of grow. And I think, you know, what Zander was talking about around, you know, when you go think about traditional real estate, you've got architects who, you know, can draw and design, and then you got, when you go to talk to tech about tech, you've got tech tech architects that actually does the engineering and the software development. But very rare do you see many talent that understands the in between, the bridge that joins the solution with actually the traditional rules, that the Bob the Builder, how we get things done, how we build things, how we operate, how do we actually reduce costs, increase revenue on our assets, how do we get more efficient. And so the real opportunity right now is especially what we're looking at with where the world's heading around innovation and technology, smart cities, to even how we're tackling climate change resilience, that the opportunity is really in the talent, about connecting those two, the traditional real estate, talent with the technology talent. And that's our opportunity, the challenge. And that also pushes people like myself to really ensure that I'm on top of the game when it comes to not just my own technical abilities, but the leadership ability to understand and foster the change in culture, but also but also the ecosystem in the community here that is doing groundbreaking things, that we can join up with the people on the panel here to ensure that we have that real groundbreaking experience in technology and innovations. And so that and there's a bigger vision for us, like, the social values, the justice that's happening even in this week around women and social equity. This is the future of our people and our children. Like, I have 3 kids, so I'm worried about climate change. It's a real challenge right now. It's a real problem. So, and then, how do we just improve our customer needs? So that's where I'm at, when it comes to talent. You just have to really push yourself. You have to self-disrupt yourself, and you have to also push the industry, which is not always easy, but if you push yourself, you can always start pushing the teams in the industry you're in.
Yeah. Helen, I love the Bob the Builder analogy you mentioned earlier.
Bridget the Builder.
Yeah, there's, like we sort of mentioned earlier, there's so many different verticals in it, and there's ethical and moral reasons to maybe go into this space, whether it's sustainability, climate tech, as well as, who knows, maybe you're really into commercial real estate or whatever it is that floats boats. There's a different avenue you can all go into. From, I guess, this conversation we've had so far, there's obviously a variety of transferable skills, whether it's soft or hard, and it's evident that there's all sorts of different career pathways to enter this space. Now, obviously, we're doing this with ReWomen, and as we all know, real estate has for a long time been more male dominated. That's changing. I think grad intake in the UK is now even. So I don't think they're taking as many grads now because there's more technology jobs, but there's change that's happening. Technology, when you think of, I don't know, an engineer developer, fairly sort of male dominated as well. So we're now, right, everyone on this panel, everyone listening in, and all my clients are focusing on diversity and making sure the culture in their businesses is balanced and attractive, and it's a happy company, whether you be small or large. And that's really difficult to manage. I've got a startup, and I'm apparently trying to put into these cultural values, which I don't really know much about. So, and maybe we'll start off actually with Helen, because Helen, I know you're a big advocate for this. You're leading women in this space. What do you think we can do to sort of evoke more sort of diversity in this space and address these cultural diversity gaps?
Yeah, just so much. There's so much more we can do. I think, there's a lot of things that has happened already. There's campaigns, there's quotas, there's a lot of training, there's trying to address the pay gap, there's also, mentorships. There's, the awareness of unconscious bias. But even if you've seen recent events, and especially COVID has unfortunately taken, we talk about flexible work, but unfortunately for a lot of families, women are making the sacrifices. And when we talk about flexibility, I get a little bit frustrated because, when my 3 kids were at home and the schools were closed, I had no flexibility, but I had to make a compromise between work, home, and being everything, a daughter, a partner, a mother, a husband, to the family and whatnot. So when it comes to the step change that we're doing, and I'm very conscious of, is supporting who are mentorship in the industry. So making sure that you have really clear sponsors that are men and women that have gone through a lot of experience pushing their own agenda, their leadership, and in a lot of various sort of fields. I think when it comes to pay gaps, we can do more when it comes to pay gap transparency. And when it comes to startups, the data, the British Banking Council did show that women founder startups are getting less money, they're getting less networking opportunities, and the data are real. And when it comes to women in technology and leadership, it's still less than, like single digit, less than 4-5%. So the reality is understanding that there's a huge gap, and the gap is actually not closing. It's not closing fast enough. And especially then you go into industries such as construction and tech, and it's even less. So I think acknowledgement that we've got a long way to go. There needs to be a real drive to push their gender equity, and then there needs to be a conscious hiring of of women, and then again like the things that we're doing right now, essentially we're driving a recruitment campaign to build the product center in Singapore with the digital team, and we're pushing for architects and software developers and data centers from even looking at schools that are that have more women or younger women who are wanting to develop their careers and access some of those graduates and whatnot. So being really conscious and not making sure that programs and leadership is talking it, and that men and women are supportive of that there needs to be a change, there needs to be a cause, and there needs to be a conscious decision making in hiring, in funding, in talent development, in investment and mentorship and capability development.
I think that's super important. One of the final points you made there is that it has to be women and men supporting this. It can't just be women going at this as well. And Zander, I know you do a lot of work in this space. You've spoken about it a lot, and you can come at it from very different angles. I think you run a alumni for your old university. I can't remember what it is. You're going to kill me. But this is something you talk about with early stage grads who obviously now you work with, big LPs. You work with 100 startups. So diversity is probably a challenge you face every single day. What do you think can be done? And maybe something, what's Metaprop doing? Because I know they work on various initiatives too.
Yeah, I think it comes from a little bit of as Helen was describing, this conscious choice and just being aware, having the open dialogue. I think from Metaprop's side and from my own experiences, that's great, but you have to take another step, is to be very proactive. And proactive in just a recent example is that we made an investment in a company that had 2 male co-founders. So for our purposes, we put on the board Maureen Waters is on the board, and also partnership with the late partners, Courtney Cooper's on there as well. So it's a female-led board, and that's more of a decision of, let's be proactive. We're trying to have this conversation of everybody's at the table, and that gives us a diversity of thought and perspectives, and that's the most important part. But as in saying from the VC side, okay, we can influence and make decisions and put people in place to have and make sure that we have diversity. That's that kind of the next step outside of, okay, we want to make sure that everyone wants to hire and have the mandates, but what can we do to actually put people that we think that will create that diverse environment? And that's dispelling a lot of, I think there's, going back to the university side, there's that the long-standing aversion to females working in STEM, but that is going away. So folks are graduating from core STEM programs. Granted, the pace is, it's increasing incrementally, but it's great to have that open dialogue of, this is opening up this world of real estate. And this is my own personal joy of PropTech, now that it's a real term, being the almost, our opening for folks who didn't have, either on the diverse side or just had no relationship to real estate, to be able to get in. Because before, if you look and do surveys around the room of folks that originally were working in real estate, you ask them why, and they said, oh, well, I had a family member who worked in real estate, and that's how I found out about it. And that's generally, at least coming from the States, and I think that actually is pretty prevalent in APAC as well. It was a family member worked in it, and that's me working now in real estate. On the other side, if you have PropTech, anyone can join a PropTech. In fact, we welcome everyone and anyone to get into the conversation, and then that levels out the playing field, the opportunities, and can open up just more for that proactive decision making of getting folks in.
Yeah. Now, Teresa, would you like to build on that as well with your experience from? This might be a bit stereotypical. I always think that in, say, a hospitality function of PropTech, there might be more women because it's more like maybe like attractive. What's your experience being on diversity in startup to also VC and maybe also from consultancies? Because I think consultancies are quite heavily biased towards men. I could be wrong, but I'd love to hear a little bit more from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was an analyst on the real estate hospitality side, so I think it was still very heavily male. And I think that was actually one of the reasons that when I went to the MBA, I kind of had this thought that I wanted to leave real estate. So in real estate hospitality in the US, there's basically two big conferences every year, one in LA in January, one in June in New York. And it was like a thing I saw as like a young analyst that like during the day you go to the conference and then at night there's these big hotel parties because it's hotel real estate. And as you went around the parties at night, like men would be taking off their wedding rings, hitting on young female analysts. Like you saw this stuff, and this was only maybe like 8 years ago. So it was kind of the decision to if I wanted to leave real estate or not, because I just didn't think it was a career that I would succeed in just by the nature of being female. And I remember when I was on campus at MBA, like why I ended up choosing consulting was we had a partner from Bain come in, and she was like, look, very realistically, like I hope women make it to the top in every single career, but if you're very selfish, go where you see female leaders right now. And she was like, I saw female partners in consulting. And obviously this was back 20, 30 years ago when there were very few females at the top in corporates. So it kind of made me think like, I can work hard to break the glass ceiling, or I can also follow in footsteps where people have already pushed it a little bit further for me. So I think very selfishly, you can kind of make these decisions. But I think bringing it back to kind of PropTech and startups and VCs, I think there's a lot more equality, but I think there's still ways to go. Because I think, again, as Helen mentioned, like female startups don't get as much funding, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you kind of have to ask yourself, like, there's three ways I think about it. Like, what can companies do at the very top? And I think that kind of brings it right back to recruitment, right? Like, you see the numbers coming out of university, there is actually more female graduates than male, but people aren't making it up the ladder. So when you actually look at the rates of promotion, females are actually still lagging. So it's like, what can we do to push women up the ladder faster? And that kind of just means you need to start with a wider funnel at the bottom. So I think it's recognizing all the steps you go into, and then like in the same way, kind of last summer during Black Lives Protest Matters, you need to be actively anti-racist. You need to be actively looking for female. So look further. Like if you're looking for one job and you're going to bring in 10 applicants, like maybe 6 out of 10 should be female to push it up. Is it equal? No. Or I mean, is it fair? No, but we're trying to make it equal. So I think those are two very different things. You can't quite be fair if you're trying to make things equal on the larger scale. And then I think about like, what can men as an individual do? And I think the clearest thing for me is recognizing their unconscious bias and like recognizing that things are set up in a way for their lives. As in, even now, I still hear like my male colleagues with my boss at previous jobs being like, oh, let's go golfing together on the weekends, which sounds like such a cliche example, but it happens, right? And then you build, foster personal relationships. So when promotion times comes around, those things do make a difference. So I think men being conscious of these little things they do that actually do hurt women in the long run. And then I think for female, we need to make sure we are the best candidate, because I don't support like, hiring a female for the sake of them being a female or, any minority. We need to make sure we are the best candidate and we're sticking up our end of the job as well.
Yeah, I guess to build on some of the things you said, Teresa, from like what I see as, well, one, a female founder, but also from my recruitment lens. When I put a job up, women are nicer and less likely to put themselves forward for a role if they don't think that they tick basically 8 out of 10 boxes, but guys always will. So I think it's also like encouraging them, like, you know, there's so many different skills which you have which might not be on like the job spec. So that's that educational piece, but that also comes from having mentors, which we've all sort of spoken about as well, and women leaders sort of promoting it and encouraging women to enter or take a chance, which obviously a lot, you know, take risk, which everyone here today has done, and try something new. I think also that what you mentioned about senior management is so important, so especially when graduates move to a company, lots of them, or whether it's like moving to a corporate or into a startup, they don't want to go into a male heavy business because it's not as relatable. I mean, I've got my 2 founders are men, and we're doing a sponsored PropTech day, and they want to do a golf day. And I was like, great, I don't want to play golf. So I said, well, let's do something else, which, you know, a bunch of the women in the PropTech community will want to do. I mean, some will want to play golf, but realistically, not everyone will. So we're trying to, like, I think it's so important to find that balance in the organization of different views and understanding. So it's like a lot more attractive and relatable to people. I'm conscious we've got about sort of 10 minutes left of the webinar. Now, I thought we could sort of end it on a note to do with more related to sort of PropTech. So it could be, and I'd love to hear from each of you. One, maybe for each PropTech, is there a space or an area which is most exciting to you? So whether it's that, could be a product, it could be maybe a vertical, which is anything you want to talk about. And if you also give one bit of advice as well for someone who's looking to move into it. Hannah, would you like to start?
Yeah, no, cheers, Louisa. I think starting with the advice, I think there's, I mean, I'd almost, and it slightly answers actually your question as well in terms of where we think PropTech's going and etc. I would suggest, if I was doing this now, I'd be looking, there's some parallels, I guess, to how we actually invest as a VC as well. And this is probably the route I'd go down. I would be looking for, you know, look for a PropTech vertical that you think is really interesting, or for whatever reason. I mean, the reasons they might find interesting is probably different to the things that obviously we're looking at from our perspectives. Undertake some analysis, look at, you know, who's in the space, what are they doing, who's raised a lot, who's the younger versions, what do the teams look like, especially actually what do the teams look like. I'd say that's incredibly important. You know, who's got the better technology, even though actually they're a lot younger than, let's say, the company that's raised, they're on their Series A, Series B, for example. And I would really do that analysis to work out what do you find interesting, which is the best solutions, the best companies, the best people, and either approach them directly. And I would always advise that as well, actually, just to have conversations, to speak with people, understand. Yeah, and you might actually, after you've had the conversations, you might think, actually, I don't want to go into this direction. I've realized it's not for me. Or completely opposite, you might think, definitely 100% this is the right company, this is the right direction. And, you know, those sort of companies may be hiring in any case, in which case, look, there's an opportunity right there for you. I would definitely, that's how I'd approach it if I was looking for a sort of a PropTech company right now. I guess in terms of, you know, what do I think is probably quite important going forward? What do I think is quite really interesting going forward? Well, we've actually just sold our previous VC to Patrizia. So this is exactly what we're doing at the moment in terms of looking at putting together the fund deck, looking at the strategy, etc. So it's actually quite apt timing. I think, I mean, there's loads of things we could talk about, obviously, but I think one of the highest levels, which I think is really exciting, and it is really sustainability. And when I say sustainability, I mean not just environmental, but also social, economic. So really every form of sustainability within the built environment. And obviously I think if I was a solution now, I'd really be thinking about, look, what is my impact on sustainability? Whatever that sustainability is, like I said, it's not just environmental, there's lots of other forms of it. And it's obviously, as we know, it's the top of agenda for corporates, for institutions, for landlords, for construction companies, as obviously Helen's alluded to as well. This is partly due to regulation, which is great. It's forcing companies to do it. But it is partly, you know, we've now acknowledged look, there's a massive problem here, we need to sort it out. So I'd say that for me is the overarching really exciting thing that is just driving all these other verticals. So that would be my sort of, I guess, key last point takeaway.
Awesome, thank you for that, Hannah. I can only imagine the acquisition between Seven and Patricia is giving you a hell of a lot of work, so thank you for joining us today. Helen, what about, well, obviously you're focusing at, I guess, looking at more like a Asia angle. Where do you think there might be a growth in the sector, or maybe an area of interest for you, and advice to someone looking to enter this space?
Look, I think right now there's a lot of growth around a lot of areas, whether it's workplace. I think workplace is a huge one because companies are all looking at their workplace strategy at the moment. How do you build talent? How do you build, culture? How do you create productivity? How do you improve design? How do we prevent, create flexible sort of products and solutions and whatnot? But when it comes to, really the largest globally, and I'm working very closely with my global team around eliminating carbon. So sustainability, I agree with Hannah, is the biggest on our agenda right now. As you know, we've probably press release 6 months ago, not long ago, to say that we're targeting absolutely zero carbon emissions target, which is 1.5 degrees Celsius aligned company. So what does that mean? It means that it's really ambitious, but we're going to be targeting scope 1 and 2 by 2025 to be net zero carbon, and then absolutely zero carbon by 2040. And that includes a social target of creating about 250 million of social value by 2025. Now, these are big numbers. There's ambition. It's really ambitious. And I've had startups which I'm collaborating with tell me we're crazy. But it starts with a bold ambition, and that is the most exciting space at the moment, because when it comes to the work we're doing with Lendlease, our new established business unit, which is a global platform called Podium, Lendlease Digital, it's about how we develop, how we construct, how we better accelerate design, how we reduce the waste, how do we support all their safety ambitions, climate change ambitions, how do we optimize our choices with our partners, our suppliers, and sustainable procurement and materials, how do we limit waste, and how do we create more renewable energy sources. So everything I'm talking about is in partnership with startups, governments, the whole ecosystem in terms of globally. So I think that's the biggest area right now, and it's also very broad, so you can almost make big change with small sectors and segments to create a holistic goal, and that's where we're at the moment, which really excites me. Excites a lot of people that fundamentally in our business right now, and that's why I'm still here after 10 years in the same organization.
It's a long stint, but I've only heard good things about obviously the culture of Lendlease as well, and how also forward thinking it is and becoming. But what's your number one bit of advice to someone looking to come into this sector though, Helen? I would just get your foot in the door, because it doesn't matter where you come from, there'll be opportunities. It's just a great time for people who want to learn, people who want to change, people who want to get involved, people who want to innovate. We need more, we need more in the industry who wants to drive change. I think, and if you have talent and you have the passion to drive change, the world is your oyster right now, because there's so much opportunities. I see it every day, and it's, I'm a bit opposite to some others on the panel. Like, I've always had a plan. I went to law school, and then I went to medicine. I studied medicine, and I did my MBA, executive MBA recently. And through that, yes, it's not really a plan, but it was a really, I think, a purpose-driven passion. And I think that's really, really important to have. I mean, yeah. The plan and the passion. Yeah, the double P, passion and plan. Teresa, what about you? Area of growth or just interest for you, and advice to someone coming into this space?
Yeah, I think when I look at what's exciting, I think what is good, as everybody else mentioned, is on the sustainability piece, because I think that's what actually moves the needle. Because I think even when you look at some of the big unicorn startups, even outside of PropTech, that have come up, like Uber, for example, did Uber actually change the world? It's just a new form of taxis, right? Like, it's not actually moving the needle when you look at it from like a 100-year view. While if we can change construction materials and make them more sustainable, If we can make concrete less carbon like emissions, like that will actually change what happens in the next 50 to 100 years for the next generation. So I think that's what excites me right now, and that's really fascinating. And then in terms of advice, I think similar to what Helen said, like you just need to get your foot in the door. And I think it's what people gave advice about on social media about, 5-10 years ago. Because it's new and because no one has experience in it, you can be an expert even though you're fairly early or young in your career. And since PropTech is just coming up, and I mean, it's now kind of entering the maturing stage, but very few people have like PropTech experience. So anybody coming in has almost an even playing field. So if you're interested in PropTech, by all means, just join in some way. Of course, people with real estate backgrounds will have a little bit of a leg up, but it's still a very different industry fundamentally in some ways. So if you're interested, just get in.
Yeah, and before we go on to Zander, we've had a couple of questions come in, and building on what Teresa just said about coming from outside sector, and I know a number of you have, and Helen, you specifically obviously did a stint in law, like you just said, you studied it. Someone said, is it an error for current lawyers to explore looking for a change in career? Personally, I know there's some of our clients like Leviton, which looks at legislation and it's a software. There's, I think it's called Search Accruent, to do with PropTech law and all of that. I could be completely wrong. There's lots of softwares out there. Personally, I would say yes, but Helen, have you got any sort of tips on that?
Yes. Because law is so segmented. It's such a diverse skill set, when it comes to property and technology. You can talk about financial risk, you can talk about risk in general, you can talk about logistics, contractually how to negotiate. Those skill sets are, whilst they're technical, they're really, also soft skills that you develop in your legal field. I suggest you look at whether it's innovation or just get into a contract role or leasing, management. Like a lot of the skills are very transferable, wholeheartedly supported.
Yeah. Also, you're pretty bloody smart if you studied law as well, and everyone wants a smart, hard-working individual in their business, especially a startup. And there's one more question. Sorry, Zander, to leave you hanging. And this one's for Hannah. What advice would you have for a graduate interested in this area? And the reason why I point this at you, Hannah, is because they're studying their RICS accredited degree, something which I know you've done. And they're doing a dissertation on Internet of Things to create smart homes. And just in general advice for graduate.
I'd get your accreditation, finish your APC. You're getting to, I presume that they'll be in one of the sort of consultancy firms. You'll learn a huge amount there, without a doubt. Even if you're talking about 2 or 3 years, you'll learn a hell of a lot. And then I would probably at that stage just then work out, okay, are you still enjoying what you're doing? In which case, maybe get a little bit more experience, or maybe actually move internally to get some slightly varied experience within the firm you're currently in, because ultimately that is the easiest way to do it, to get some more experience without moving out. But if not, again, I'd probably just take the approach I took before. Look at the whole PropTech arena, what really interests you, and then, as I said, just a deep dive into certain verticals, because I mean, ultimately, all of us work better if we actually enjoy what we're doing. If you're working in a really cool firm in actually an area that you're not bothered about, you're not likely to actually probably make that much progression or necessarily even learn that much. So I definitely just, which areas of your grad, because obviously within your grad scheme, of course, you'll have done quite a few different rotations. So you'll have probably quite a broad overview of real estate by that point. Just what interests you and just follow it. And if that means following actually 3 or 4 different verticals to sort of end up where you think you want to go, then I think it's definitely it's an exercise that's worth doing to find the right direction.
I think also on that, obviously my recruiter angle, and again, but recruiter lens, within real estate and a lot of our real estate technology clients, where it's early stage, late stage, everyone's looking for that surveyor who can help them understand the issues in real estate, or help them business development, or get their product in front of X investment manager, a Jones Lang LaSalle, a big global agency. So get that APC, send your CV to LMRE, but there's plenty of opportunities for you as your next step. But there's no point, obviously, like Hannah said, not getting your letters, finish that, because you've worked so bloody hard for it. Zander, sorry to keep you hanging, babe. tell us about what's an area of growth for you, which you're particularly interested in, and advice to someone coming into this sector.
Yeah, I'll start with the advice side just to piggyback off Hannah, is to say, like, I mean, one good parting word is that if you find things that you don't like doing and you're particularly not really interested, don't do those things. That's also really important. You can find the things you're good at or the things you like, but also pick out the things you don't like and just do not do that. That's something that if someone told me that, I would not have gone down a few paths. And also it's all about offloading work too. That's like a big thing in your career and your progression, is not just taking on work just for the sake of it. If you're not interested in it, that's not a field you should be pursuing. It's really about finding your passion, but finding things that you're not passionate about. And then back to some of the big bets, things that are exciting about to me. I think it's tying both in the sustainability front, but also affordability. So on the affordability side, and I'll just say this pretty flat out, the person that solves and cracks affordability, so affordable housing, and in a thoughtful and meaningful way, is likely the next billionaire in the space. That's just hands down. If you could solve for that, this is an organization that we work hand in hand with, and we're just trying to reduce the cost of construction. We're trying to do it in a manner that is also sustainable, because sustainability leads to a reduced cost of the life cycle of the asset, and then also delivering that product in a high quality way so that it lasts. This is extremely important, and that's going to tie back to, as Teresa describing, from all the way from the material side, from concrete going forward. There's a lot of little intermediate steps along the way that need to be solved. So there's so much opportunity just in delivering an affordable house. If you can solve for that, and I challenge that to the whole world, please call me if you solve for that. Also, if you solve for title.
I just want to say I agree with that wholeheartedly. That's a huge on our agenda at the moment, affordability, and therefore the other topic relating to this, which we're really looking at, is DFMA, so the design and for manufacturing assembly. So how do we make sure that we modularize so that we create better quality in product, but also cheaper and better. So that's a great point. Thank you.
I just saw a really cool one yesterday that we should definitely talk about, that was doing that from a SaaS perspective. That we should definitely talk. But also on two other challenges: solving for title, and that's where, if you're coming with a legal background, title is connecting that back to the local municipalities. Big problem. Some entitlement projects haven't been going on for 10 plus years, and they just still haven't gotten it, which is, sometimes makes you a little crazy. Then the other side, I think that one of the coolest things that I saw from the energy management is harnessing kinetic energy. So if you look across the board of sustainable renewable energies, renewables have a lot of their faults, but if you were able to create or utilize kinetic machinery, that I saw something in the past few days that blew me away. And it was just that kind of thinking that could be applied to the rest of the construction process for the management of the asset. And then that can lead us to a more renewable future, but a future that can happen in the next 5 years. We don't have to wait till we finally crack solar, till we finally find ways around nuclear energy. This is the kind of conversation that we're really excited about.
And Zander, obviously you're excited about a lot of things in real estate technology. Give us some advice for someone listening in for coming into this sector. Last bit of advice.
Yeah, I think one side that's really important is just laying out the landscape, as you're entering in. So just knowing who the players are, so who the top asset management firms are, who the top services firms. So who's JLL, who's CBRE, who's Blackstone, who's Brookfield, knowing what that framework looks like, and then knowing who the ERPs are, what is Yardi, what's JD Edwards, what's Sage, knowing those core factors, because that's like the fundamental building blocks. And then you take that side and you say, you understand some of the basic language behind leasing, letting, understanding the metric from NER, NPV, with payback periods. But those are basic core, just so you can communicate to both sides of the equation. And as I described earlier, that empathy. So empathy is just speaking in someone's language. You speak to someone on the technology and the development side and understanding what an API is. That's going to give you just an entrance into the door in the conversation. And then understanding just how someone measures out a payback period. You can speak to a real estate and what IRR is. Knowing the key metrics can give you that language skill, and that's just an important stepping stone. And then as you're getting the conversation, you'll understand, but just lay that out first similar to how Helen's describing, like laying out Egyptology and just having a fascination with generally pyramids and buildings. Know the history, and that'll empower you to have a productive conversation with the folks that you're talking about as you get your foot in the door.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Zander. Also, thank you for joining us super early as well. Appreciate that. We come to the end of the webinar. We've run over, but I'm not surprised we've run over because our panel has shared some super interesting insights and hopefully told everyone here there's plenty of career pathways for you. It's not just the traditional real estate route. Hopefully they've encouraged you to think in a slightly more sort of creative way as well, but also a different way to reimagine real estate. I mean, who knows what the next 5-10 years will look like, how you form a building, how we'll sort of make them more energy efficient, save the world. There's so many different areas, and obviously day-to-day I'm a recruiter, but like I'm in this space because I'm interested in it as well. I'm passionate about it. I'd like to thank obviously all the amazing panel. I'm sure they'd be happy to hear about you if you want to connect them on LinkedIn. Big thank you to ReWomen as well, and for all the amazing things they're doing for our community. Obviously, big shout out to our LMRE team for organising this event. And if you want to hear about different career options or just have a chat about it, reach out to any of my amazing team at LMRE. But otherwise, I hope everyone has a good day, and thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Bye.
Bye.